Let us go right on in. Okay, so I'm here, y'all. Let's get it. Let me get my point so I can get this ready. Okay, so bam. All right, so entities like nonprofits, churches, and foundations, they can consure or they can consure. They can secure tax exempt status. Okay, but if you like a director or a pastor or director, uh, you still may be taxed after the business is tax exempt. You have to pay all the expenses, and your salary is an expense of the nonprofit church or foundation for running, operating its affairs. You have to pay yourself. You have to get some money out of your business. You have to pay all the bills, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to tax you on that money you kept for yourself. Okay, so having a tax exempt business does not mean you are directly tax exempt in this regard. And some people have some tricks of the trade or what have you, and how they would, you know, use the ministry's funds or use the church's funds, use the nonprofit's funds for some aspects of personal provision to kind of dodge the claim of, hey, all of this is my income, in which it would be taxable. So to try to do that, but anything coming over to you in this regard is going to be taxable, liable for taxes. Okay, so this creates a situation where the entity is exempt, but the individual is still considered a debtor to the state. Relative to you being a national or having state allegiance, then you must support the club, the corporation, the et cetera that you are a part of. You must support it. Okay, so this does not address the individual's personal tax liability or jurisdiction. Why aren't you supporting the club if you are in the club, if you are in the state, operating, doing business, doing commerce in the state, and you are a national of the state, citizen in this regard? Why are you paying taxes to support and maintain the establishment? Okay. But we want to be recognized as the foundation of the mission. So you personally are the core aspect of the nonprofit, the church, and the foundation. All right, so this is identity-based exemption. It focuses on an individual's identity as the reason for the tax-exempt operations. Okay, it proposes that correcting one's status can make the individual separate. So before I say tax exempt, separate from the state, so that correcting one's status makes you separate from the state in your tax exempt activity. Now, this would be relative to restoring one's true identity, which is the restoration of one's nation, and the benefit of your nation can provide benefit to the world. The creativity, the gifts and talents, the views and perspectives on commerce is a gift to the rest of the world. So your nation needs to be restored, but we can't restore your nation without restoring your nationality, you being one of the nation to restore it. And this is all nonprofit work, is it not? Right. This is all nonprofit work. This is all church work. Okay. So it sees the individual as the mission's foundation and not the entity. All right. So this is like some sort of nonprofit sole proprietorship that is really a trust in this regard. So this is how it's kind of structured, because through trust you can self-govern, which goes into the self aspect of the sole proprietorship. But here we want to focus on one at a time, one at a time. So when we looking at how, if I don't pay taxes to the state, if I am exempt from paying taxes to the state, I'm not supporting the state, I don't owe the state, I'm not a debtor to the state, then I'm not a part of like the state society in this sense. I'm not a part of it. So this is the first aspect of separation that is relative to legal freedom. Because if I don't support the society, being not a member of the society, then how can its rules be enforced on me in the same capacity? So now we're going to say now rules can't be enforced on you. You can't just be a terrorist or some sort of criminal, etc. in this regard. But we're saying in the same capacity, I should have some sense of exemption if I'm not really bothering anybody from certain aspects or operations that are part of the social club or the social structure. If I'm not a part of that social club or social structure, then I'm not responsible for upholding that club structure, the state structure. And I'm not investing my money or supporting, donating, whatever. Taxes is a pledge. I'm not donating my money to the state to support its functions because I don't benefit from it because I'm not a member of it. In this regard, how can its rudiments and its processes, how can I really be subject to it? So this creates the foundation of freedom. This creates the gray shaded area in which everything is built on. Okay. These so-called legal loopholes. Now, this takes precedence because you really got to show that your operations and your life activity is aligned with the nonprofit's mission and purpose and activity so that, you can continually enforce your separation in regards to the concept of exemption. All right. Okay, so I wanted to just clarify that up so we all good. We all good? Y'all following me? Let's go. Okay, so you have this false debtor identity going on. This is this presumed identity within the public debt system. Okay, that you are the item sonens or the all capital letters name that owes the system, the sole proprietorship. It's not a straw man. That's a different topic. It is legally classified as a sole proprietorship. So let's look at the foundation of this. The central argument of this theory is that an individual's tax liability stems from a presumption based on a false or debtor's identity that they owe society from benefiting from it. The objective is to rebut this presumption by restoring one's true identity, nationality, and allegiance. All right. I don't owe you because, one, this isn't my true identity, because two, it doesn't reflect my true nationality, which reflects my true allegiance, because I have allegiance to my ancestral nation, not this one. And if I was to support or fund or pledge any money or funds, it would go towards that which reflects me and not that which has subjected me without proper restoration. All right. So that's just it in a nutshell. So we have identity. We have first, recognize the false debtor's identity as the item sonus that doesn't reflect your true self. Then the status correction is based on your true identity, which is based on your nationality, which goes into your purpose, what you are doing in commerce. Now, this non-debtor status that is created, one who doesn't owe allegiance to the state, but owes allegiance to his ancestral nationality, his ancestral nation, and therefore his income is derived for the purposes of benefiting or building that. All right, then it is tax exempt. Okay. Okay, so you want to correct this thing nunc pro tunc, correcting one's status nunc pro tunc, correcting one's name and identity, restore retroactively to erase errors and misnomers such as the item sonens. Okay, which is the name being, if it sound the same. So you need a whole new name to correct one's name and identity nunc pro tunc, a whole new identity, so that you don't have the item sonens identity, which is presumed subject. All right, but I don't want to go too deep on these concepts. I want to stay on it. But they're there, the nunc pro tunc, retroactive restoration, and a new identity to avoid the item sonens doctrine. The doctrine of one's identity being presumed known based on the sound of the name. If it's spelled the same, sound the same. Okay, so we don't want a misnomer in your status correction. You don't want to be misnamed because that name has allegiance to the state. It may be erroneous. It's a false debtor's identity, but that name has allegiance to the state, and that it has a contract of subjection to the state. So you need a new name, all right, to prevent the items on this doctrine from falsely equating names that sound alike. So you don't want that name, you don't want that sound, because they say, oh, well, that's the same name spelled the same. Okay, yeah, that's you're the guy who owes us, right, from birth. You said you were part of the system, you owe us. Okay, so you want to get rid of that. New identity, not the false debtor's identity or nothing similar or relative that would confuse or mix you with the false debtor's identity. So that's an identity correction based on one's true nationality to eliminate this status of being a debtor to the state. Okay. And if you can not owe the state financially, which would be a law. It's if you owed the state financially and didn't fulfill that obligations, that would be illegal or criminal. So if this is where we go into the aspect of separation in regards to this criminal, the oppressive things that they say are crimes when there is no true breach of peace or mens rea, which is like criminal intention or even injured parties relative to a breach of peace. So there are a lot of laws that are deemed criminal that don't have a true effect, a ripple effect of negative consequence in society. It is all based on presumption, and that is oppressive. It is an oppressive presumption, to say the least. Okay, so we want to create that private non-debtor jurisdiction through identity restoration, restoring one's identity based on the restoration of one's true nationality, which is based on the restoration, or how should we say, the activation of one's true purpose. So the restoration of one's true identity is based on the restoration of one's true nationality, which is based on the restoration of one's true nation, which is based on the activation of one's true purpose. This is, you are to be yourself. And if you are not yourself, then you are to restore yourself. And everything else sounds subject, doesn't it? Like it's secondary, other than being yourself and restoring yourself. You would want to do everything else after you are yourself. That yourself, kind of is priority. You know what I mean? So just put them Jews the rule on you. All right, so let's keep going. Keep going. Okay, so we had this public debt system theory of, based on the suspending of the gold clause, it enacted fundamentally altering the financial landscape. Okay, so things were changed, shifted in this regards to the view of labor. Because so we going into this not in no money that's not real and none of that, because Congress has the right to change and coin money as it sees fit. The state doesn't, but Congress does. And the state is not making any money. Congress is partnered with the Federal Reserve and they are making the money. The states aren't making money. So people saying the dollar isn't real, it isn't valid or lawful money because we were originally supposed to use gold, don't really understand the way the government is set up. They have the ability to decree or use the clause of fiat and say, this is what we want to use because we are our own government and this is what we want to use. All right, and that's pretty much it. How you going to tell somebody what's valuable in their house? This is their house. You need to understand you're a refugee. That's not your house. That's not your argument. All right, so these acts declared U.S. citizens as sureties for the public debt. So it did. When their debts were swapped over exchange in this new system, don't want to go too detailed or go too in depth in the details of that in this episode about House Joint Resolution 192 and Public Law 7310 in this regard about the switching of the financial system from the gold standard over to the Federal Reserve use, and Federal Reserve notes being useful to discharge all debts dollar for dollar, equivalent with gold, gold's power to discharge debts dollar for dollar. So paper money replaced gold and its ability to pay all debts dollar for dollar. So it didn't replace 50% of it, it replaced 100% of it. If you owed $100 in gold, you could pay $100 in Federal Reserve dollar for dollar. It discharged the debt. Not that you can live month to month rent free. Okay, so you didn't hear that from Here, we didn't drop that jewel on you. That's not a jewel. That's a rock. That ain't. That's a clump of mud. That is not truthful. Okay, we don't want to send you astray or put no stumbling blocks before you. All right, so the acts declared you sureties for the public debt. This new borrowing of the Federal Reserve money is like, hey, look, we can always borrow based on the labor of the people. So the labor of the people is taxable and we dictate taxes. So we can always extract from the people to repay debts because the people have to live, eat. We structure society in a consuming fashion and not necessarily in a self-sufficient fashion. We structure society for commerce and communism and not necessarily on family and survival. So people are going to buy food, work and buy food versus go hunt and prepare their own food. They're going to partake in the social arena. We ensure it. And as long as they partake in this social arena, we'll always be able to tax their social arena activity, their economic activity. And then we can always pay back debts based on that. So you can have full faith and credit that we will repay if we borrow. This is this process. And this is how you became the surety in this process. So when we look at it here, Black people always been, or people in a sense, but with specifications on blacks as they the number one economic contributors in the country. They've always been based on labor and the indebtedness of your labor is what everything is predicated on. And that indebtedness is ensured based on the structure of society. They can ensure the majority of people are going to work to pay their bills instead of going out to build their own home. They can kind of ensure this. The Industrial Revolution stripped away that aspect of life. Like hey, come to the city and work in the big production factory and then get you a house just not too far away from the factory and then partake in all of the businesses that's around. And now this is life. No going back out to the farm or rural area where self-sufficiency is much more common. So now they say, hey, based on that Industrial Revolution, we know for a fact everybody gonna get up and go to that 9 to 5 plantation. You can let us borrow money. Okay, so just wanted to pull that out. A whole new bondage system. So when you are thinking about, how do we say, reestablishing your nationality, you have to do it based on the law relative to the establishment of nations or the criteria for statehood. So you're going to need a permanent population. You're going to need a defined territory. You're going to need a government structure, and you're going to need the ability to do relations, commerce, or contract with other nations. Okay, this is all according to the Montevideo Convention. And notice the Montevideo Convention also right around 1933. Okay, so we have things were very, very busy in regards to the legal restructuring of life in America. Just to sum it up. Okay, so this personal sovereignty application, where individuals are restoring their true nationality and declare their mission as rebuilding their nation, transforms a nonprofit mission into an international diplomatic mission, and it aligns individual commerce with national restoration and purpose. Okay, that bloodline is the permanent population. The defined territory is the space in which the bloodline occupies. So that would be your physical bodies. The government structure would be the network amongst those people, and the international relations. Well, you're going to need some form of commerce. You're going to need some sort of motion in order to be doing relations with other nations. Because how are you guys relating? On what matter? What are you doing? What does that activity look like? All right, so now we go into the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, 1961. And if you are an ambassador rebuilding a nation, engaged in international relations with the United States based on the establishment or the restoration of your nation, this gives you a form of immunity, that tax immunity exemption, which also leans into the criminal aspect. not complete. You cannot, shoot bazookas in the middle of the street and say you're an ambassador. That's public safety. That's breach of peace. If you're not breaching the peace, you're exempt. So this is what we want to we want to live by. Okay. So aligning your business with this mission to become an ambassador. This is your diplomatic instrumentality. And you need this, according to the Vienna Convention, to be dealing with international exemptions. And this international exemption is going to be based on your compliance with the Montevideo Convention in regards to your preparation for international relations. So if you prepare yourself for international relations according to the Montevideo Convention, then you are in a position to receive the immunities under the Vienna Convention, because your preparations for international relations would be in compliance with the Vienna Convention's requirement of international relations. So these two are tied. These two are tied in jurisprudence. I just want to point that out for folks. Okay, so nunc pro tunc and the item sonans. We based on this, but it's basically the concept of now for then, or to correct my identity retroactive based on what it should have been. And not only even what it should have been from the inception of my birth, but what it should have been from the inception of the slaves being free. The moment the slaves were free, at that moment, we should have been dealing with a nunc pro tunc retroactive correction, restoring you back to whence you came from. Okay, so that's the nunc pro tunc retroactive correction, now for then. So the discovery now, the truth that is revealed now, will be applied retroactively back then. So it'll be as if it never happened. It would be erased. Okay, but in order to do this, you must avoid the item sonans doctrine. So you need an identity that has no reflection on the old identity. And in a nutshell, meaning you need a new name, meaning you need a rebirth. You need a new name, a new nature, a new purpose. Because again, that new name comes with a new nature or a new purpose, because that new name comes with a new nationality, and that nationality is based on restoring your nation, and the activity of restoring that nation is the true purpose or activity of your name. That is your true nature. That is who you are. This is who you are. It is your nation, your nationality. It is yourself. So the establishment of self, the revelation of self, the restoration of self is your purpose. Your purpose is to be yourself at all times. Whether you are broken, you need to restore yourself, or whether you are fixed, you need to maintain yourself. If you are in a state of optimization, maintain yourself. If you are broken, rebuild yourself. But always be yourself. Hey, we talking about what it means to rule within you. Okay. Can't lose. Okay, so now let's go deeper. So let's look at this jurisdiction of allegiance, because you're saying you under allegiance of your true nation, the nation in which you come from, and not an allegiance to a debtor system that subjects you for not being your true self. Okay, so not only does it force you to not be your true self, it also charges you for it as well. This is not beneficial in no way, shape, form, or fashion. Your allegiance is tied to your true self, and your true self is tied to your true nation. Okay, so to be yourself is to have allegiance to yourself. You gotta be in allegiance to yourself, or you have to be displaying allegiance to oneself if you are devoted to constantly being oneself, one's true self, and not an identity that has been given for the purposes of assimilation, for the purposes of exploitation. Okay, destruction. All right. So the legal reality and court rejections. Okay, so let's go into the concept of trying to claim frivolous arguments, like the claim that the United States isn't real, it doesn't apply to me, or I'm not that type of person. What is it? The argument that the individual is not a person under the International Revenue Code, on a misleading. So we're not using none of those that may be known in the sovereign citizen movement. I'm not within the United States because it doesn't physically exist. So they can't tax me from based on a geographic definition. You can't physically find the individual states. Like the barriers or boundaries doesn't exist. So they're saying geographically, I cannot physically see the state. So based on that geographic reality, I am not subject to something I cannot see. But that is not true reality because you are subject to many forces in which you cannot directly see. So although the boundaries or the barriers are not geographically there, it does not mean they are not there in principality, in the spirit, energetically, so forth, based on decree, power, etc. Okay, so the argument that an individual is not a person and is not in the United States is frivolous. We don't do that. Okay. Or we're not dealing with no linguistic gymnastics, as was discussed in what is it, O'Driscoll versus the IRS, where the court stated that despite his linguistic gymnastics about what a person is and what the state is and all these different angles of definition, is that you got to pay. You're gonna have to pay Pennsylvania, okay, because you live here, you subject, etc. So this will also go into how you are classified as living or residing or being domiciled here. Are you a resident? Is this your domicile? Or is this your domain? Or are you sojourning the land seeking asylum? All right. Because if you live here and you're a part of it, you got to support the club. Okay. But if you're just a visitor, then you get passes. For example, visitors who come to my house, they don't have to necessarily wash the dishes or take the garbage out. Okay. They visitors, they get a pass, they get an exemption. Some rules they have to follow, like take your shoes off in my house. Okay, cool. But not all of them, like the maintaining of the house. So the operating and respecting of my house, those requirements are enforced, but the maintaining of my house is not enforced. Very much so when we're dealing with living within the state. The respect of peaceful operations is expected within the state, but the maintaining of it is not. Okay, so that is where we getting at. All right, this is where we getting at in depth, in depth. So you got United States versus Sloan affirm that tax evasion conviction, rejecting their argument that the federal tax laws did not apply because the individual was freeborn, natural individual. All right, and you have other United States versus Ward, United States versus Sylvan. Here's several. Gerald's, all based on frivolous arguments. Okay, frivolous arguments. Ours is based on we're not a part of this nation. We're not from this nation. Hey, our whole life is built on rebuilding our nation. We have no dealings with you. All right. Okay, so I want folks to understand this in depth. Okay. Want folks to really, really get this in depth. You got the civil and criminal penalties. All right, for what we say, tax evasion is financial, and we got the criminals and the bridges between the two. So having great discernment in regards to what you are subject to and what you are exempt from in regards to civil and criminal penalties is optimal when operating with a corrected status so that you don't subject yourself after you have freed yourself. So the conclusion is there's a legal reality. All right. So we are not trying to say, how do I say, we're giving any type of legal advice here. Okay. No type of legal advice. All right. If you want legal advice in regards to taxes, seek qualified tax professionals and legal professionals. But we are giving you a legal reality. All right. So theories claiming personal tax exemption based on separation from state jurisdiction are universally rejected by tax authorities and courts. All right, these claims are associated with sovereign citizen movements. That's not what we're saying. We're not associated with any sovereign citizen movement. We're not saying, hey, we're living in the state and the state doesn't have power over us, or the state owes us some sort of special privilege, although we are saying we are members of the state and not paying our membership dues. That is tax evasion, not tax avoidance. You avoid taxes when you avoid the classification as being a part of this society. It's just that simple. It is just that simple. You don't have to live as a subject. Okay. Tax exemption will put you in a whole nother jurisdiction, a whole nother bracket. This gray shaded area of who the Son sets free is free indeed. To simply put, you working. God, Jesus said it. God, Jesus, he said it in the scriptures. He said, "Who do the sons pay tribute to? Or who do the kings of the earth tax? Who do they tax tribute? The sons of their kingdom or the strangers?" He said, the strangers. He said, "Okay, cool." So in regards to a kingdom enforcing taxes, it would normally be the classification of the people in the state being exempt and the people who are outsiders being taxed. And this is kind of the sovereign citizen ideology, saying, hey, I'm a state national, I'm a part of this state, you don't tax me, tax the outsiders, the people you're letting come in the country to try to earn money, tax them. But United States being completely backwards from that way and process in which governments, kingdoms, nations would not tax its native born citizens and tax the outsiders. It's sort of still that way. Just you have to go deeper. Why I say that? Because you have the Emergency War Powers Act and the Trading with the Enemies Act, which deemed those of the country native born potential enemies to the economic structure of society and be based on their spending habits after the Great Depression. Because in a sense, people's spending habits and financial management led to the Great Depression and pulling out their money, et cetera, et cetera. People's economic activity led to that Great Depression. So they deemed, hey, these people are irresponsible. We have to deal with the Trading with the Enemies Act because their economic activity could lead to another depression or downfall of our country. So now the people who are native born to the country are also treated like outsiders and are taxed based on their ignorance or inability to know how to properly maintain economic activity versus outsiders who come over here with the direct intention for building, expanding, and maintaining economic activity. So now the outsiders are tax exempt and the insiders, who are sheeple in a sense, are not. So you would want to be an outsider in this regard. Just had to drop them Jews on your tax exemption is the private jurisdiction that leads to not only financial freedom, but also legal freedom when there is no breach of peace or mens rea. Got it? Cool. Keep your crown on. We'll see you soon.